attachment style is not your destiny. Your attachment style is not your destiny. So, and I'm the hope dealer, so there's a hope here for this message as well, which is um, they're not permanent. They're not permanent. So, what was learned can be unlearned, and that's for any place that we've learned something. It can be unlearned. Secure attachment in men often looks like quiet confidence, not dominance. There's a big difference, right? It's the man who doesn't need to raise his voice in order to be heard. It's the man who doesn't shut down when things get hard, because things are going to get hard. But it's the man who's not going to shut down. Ambiguity fuels anxious attachment. Brene Brown says, "Clear is kind, and yet clarity reduces that fear." Welcome back to another episode of the Heal to Lead podcast, a space where we're coming to unlearn surviving life and embracing wholeness. It's not about, perfection, it's about presence. Thank you for joining me. I am your host, the one and only Kevin Overton-Hadnot, aka Hope Dealer, aka your favorite therapist, however you want to label it. I'm here, we're jumping in. Also today, I don't have my dog. My dog is with with his grandmother, and hanging out with her as she navigate her recovery. But listen, I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to talk about this topic today. I got my cue cards, but I wanted to hold them just to show you that we're serious about Heal to Lead, and we're serious about bringing conversations to you. I hope you're watching us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or iHeartRadio. Make sure you're sharing, make sure you're liking, make sure you're subscribing to wherever you get your podcasts. But today we are talking about attachment styles. And of course, in this Heal to Lead space, I'm going back and forth always between, the workplace, leadership in general, male leadership and wherever men are leading, whether that's with families, communities, fraternities, you name it. I'll talk more about that in this episode in particular, and I give a real example and a real reason why I'm talking about workplace so much. But I want to talk about, you're juxtaposing, as many people often do, this secure attachment versus this insecure attachment. But my hope is that attachment can be earned. Attachment can be earned. And some questions to even get the juices flowing already is, how do attachment styles affect leadership? How do attachment styles affect leadership? Or can teams or families, if you want to stretch it some, can they become corrective experiences for you? So that's what we're talking about. I just have a note to take a deep breath. All right. Like I said, today we're talking about something that really quietly shapes nearly every probably household dynamic, workplace dynamic, every leadership decision, every team culture. And that is attachment. Attachment. Say it with me, attachment. But most people think that attachment styles apply to just like romantic relationships, and that's what we want to dive and weave in and out of for sure. But the truth is, like, attachment patterns, they show up everywhere. People interact. So wherever we're interacting with people, as the church say, wherever two or three are gathered, listen, that's where the spirit is. Right? Amen to that. But also we see pattern or attachment patterns. Like, they show up in how men, how leaders handle feedback, how teams handle conflict in general. We see that with how employees interpret silence sometimes. So we also see that how managers respond to mistakes. I know for me nowadays, and I might just put myself up here, like, I've just gotten to the place of being able to say, oops, like, this was a mistake, like, give myself some grace, and to kind of practice that in and of itself. We also see attachment patterns. Again, this is where they enter, where everywhere where people interact. And we see how people react when they feel ignored or unsupported. So, and the truth is, and maybe this is maybe the key truth that we're going to start with today, like your attachment style is not your destiny. Your attachment style is not your destiny. For me, it is a pattern, and I want to label it as this as we come into this conversation. And patterns, though, can be rewired through maybe safe relationships. I'm thinking about they can be rewired through awareness. Awareness is a key here, and they can be rewired through intentional leadership. So, which means the workplace can actually become a place. Maybe even the family can become a place, but the workplace can become a place where people begin to experience what I'm calling earned security. So you can see, I'm excited to kind of just keep diving into this. I think I tell my clients I have a quirky personality, but also I just kind of geek out on like this work. I mean, I eat, sleep, breathe mental health, but I want to go deeper and explore this together today. So we're going to explore like what attachment styles are. I want to explore how they show up in leadership and either team or family dynamics, and then explore how we can create environments that help people move toward secure attachment. Again, this for me is when we talk about these topics on whichever podcast episode you watch so far. My hope is that we're not hearing and listening and then judging ourselves or criticizing, but really we're just fueling ourselves with data and giving ourselves the gift of information and then reflection. For me, I'm hoping that this is a mirror of reflection for you to kind of see where some of these topics or key points are hitting you, and maybe and metabolize them as you need to, but then process and grow essentially. So we're going to explore these areas together, but I would love if you have questions or comments. Email me at healtolead@gmail.com, but also DM me or send me a message under the comments, and we're checking that as well. So let's understand a little bit more about attachment styles. And I'm not giving like a full like clinical course lesson or 101, but just to kind of help us understand and set some foundational information. Um, I want to understand exactly what attachment is. Attachment theory, it originated from a psychologist by the name of John Bowlby, and then later it was expanded through research of Mary Ainsworth. And at its core, attachment theory explains how early relationships shape the way we experience a couple of things. I'm thinking about safety, how we experience trust, and how we experience connection with others. So, I've been talking a lot over the past couple of episodes as well about nervous system, and I'm going to interject that or intersect that here as well. Our nervous system learns early on, are people safe? Um, our nervous system learns early on, will my needs be met? Key word, my needs. When will they be met? Our nervous system learns early on, is it safe to depend on others? And also, we learn even this question, do I matter? Do I matter? And those early relational patterns form what we think about as internal working models. And those models really follow us, believe it or not, into adulthood. So, yes, it's something that derived in our early childhood development process, but those models that we acquire, right, follow us through adulthood. And that includes in the workplace, that includes in families, that includes other systems that we're operating or interacting with other people. Hey, what's up, guys? I hope you're enjoying this episode. I wanted to pause to show you my journal, A Man's Guide to Healing and Leadership. It's available right now on Amazon.com. Pick it up today. Pick it up for you, for your son, for your brother, for your uncle, for your cousin. This is a 21-day journey to reclaim your strength, your purpose, and authentic leadership through healing. I take you through 21 days of deep, reflective content that oftentimes we sweep under the rug or we avoid or we don't make time for. But this journal allows us to make space for the things that's really important to us, and that is our own healing. One of the days we talk about building resilience, embracing vulnerability, the power of forgiveness, confronting anger. Day 3 is my favorite, which is on healing the inner child. Listen, man, pick this book up today. I hope it will bless your life. Thank you. Now back to the show. So our nervous systems, it learns early on a couple of things. One is, are people safe? And our nervous system learns early on, will my needs be met? Emphasis on will my needs be met? And that's not selfish. That's just our system, our nervous system, being able to determine that. And also, is it safe to be able to depend on others? And then the last thing that our nervous system learns early on is, do I matter? And those early relational patterns form what we think about as internal working models. And those models follow us into adulthood. So again, we're learning, it's learning this as we, in our early childhood development process, and it's following us into adulthood, including work, including, households and leading in homes and other places where we're interacting with people. So now that we sort of understand that attachment shapes how we experience trust and safety and connection, I want to bring into a more personal lens, especially for men, because many of us, again, were not just shaped by our early attachment experiences. They were also shaped by cultural expectations. I know I mention this probably every episode, but I think it's so worth it to keep as a reminder some of the messages that we are as men picking up from an early age. And again, I don't know if you're jumping into Hill to Lead podcast on this episode or one before, but here today as you're listening, I'm just reminding us that some of our earlier cultural expectations that we received messages like, don't be weak, handle it yourself, right? Man up. We also learned that emotions are a problem to solve rather than not something to express. So what happens is our attachment patterns don't just form in childhood. Those attachment patterns, they get reinforced then by masculinity norms. So which means that a lot of men, a lot of us, I put myself in this too, we're walking into leadership roles, we're walking into marriages and relationships, in careers, in teams, not without attachment, but without attachment patterns that we were never given the language for. And so I want to break these down a little bit more simpler. So the four main attachment styles that we think about is, the first one is secure attachment. Maybe a definition is a pattern of relating where a person feels safe with closeness, trust others, and maintain a healthy sense of self worth. So that sounds amazing. Securely attached individuals generally have maybe one of four things. People are, or believe rather, one of four things. People are mostly trustworthy, that conflict can be worked through. They are worthy of connection, and in independence and closeness can coexist. So those are ideals that securely attached individuals generally believe. In leadership, it may look like, emotional stability, comfort with feedback. It may look like healthy boundaries. I know we hate that B word, but boundaries are for all of us, including men. I'll say it again: boundaries are for all of us, including men. Also, in leadership, it looks like the ability to repair conflict. That's a key one as well. But here's what's important, I think, for men. Secure attachment in men often looks like quiet confidence, not dominance. There's a big difference, right? It's the man who doesn't need to raise his voice in order to be heard. It's the man who doesn't shut down when things get hard, because things are going to get hard. But it's the man who's not going to shut down. It's the man who can admit when he's wrong. Like, you're not a perfect being, and give yourself grace for that, and accept that, right? And also, it's the man who can stay present in uncomfortable conversations. Staying present is so key. Secure men don't confuse. Secure men don't confuse, in my notes here, like control with strength. They understand that real strength, and I mean real strength, is emotional regulation, plus relational safety. Again, they don't need to dominate a room in order to feel valuable. And I think the opposite of that is they actually create the psychological safety within it. So that's what I think about when I think about secure attachment. Another one is anxious attachment. A definition could be or is a pattern of relating marked by a strong desire for closeness combined with the fear of rejection, one, and then a fear of abandonment. So, anxiously attached individuals often fear abandonment or rejection. I think about their nervous system is constantly scanning for signs of disapproval. Like, as an example, in the workplace, this may look like overworking to prove worth. I'm guilty of that. Maybe fear of disappointing leadership, sensitivity to criticism. And then another one is like seeking constant reassurance. And they may interpret neutral communication as negative feedback. Like for example, the short email from a boss may feel like rejection to this person who may be have an anxious attachment style. Their internal dialogue may sound like, did I do something wrong? Or are they upset with me? Now, again, juxtaposing this to how it may show up just in men, like because men are often discouraged from expressing need, like anxious attachment doesn't always look like clingy. It often looks like overperformance instead of wanting to be vulnerable, maybe achievement as a way of approval, and then it also can look like silent pressure to be enough without even asking for like support even when it's needed. So it's the man in my mind who like works late to it, working late not because he has to, but because he feels like he has something to prove, or struggles to rest without guilt. I'll pause on that one. Struggles to rest without guilt, or maybe ties his work to productivity. Like underneath his drive is probably like a deeper unspoken fear. So like, again, if I'm not performing, then I'm not valuable. And those are like the thoughts that come up for someone who may be experiencing or who has an anxious attachment style. What about avoiding attachment? A definition is a pattern of relating where a person minimizes emotional needs and avoids dependence on others to protect themselves from vulnerability. So, avoiding attachment develops when emotional needs were dismissed or discouraged early on in life. Like the nervous system then is probably learning like dependence is unsafe for me. Like in the workplace, if you want to use this as an idea, it can look like emotional distance, and this happens in just relationships, right? Emotional distance, difficulty trusting. It can look like preference for independence, discomfort with vulnerability. Avoidant leaders may unintentionally create like cultures that look like or create cultures where emotions are minimalized. May create a culture where connection is highly discouraged, and even productivity replaces humanity. So this is one of the most common patterns I think seen in men. But I would love to hear your feedback in the comments if you agree or disagree. But because many men were taught early, like, no, don't talk about feelings, don't rely on others, like, you have to go figure it out. Um, those are sort of, um, what do I mean? Patterns, right, of relating that develop essentially. So, again, avoiding attachment then can look like I don't need anybody, like, just give me the task, or let's not make this emotional. We hear that oftentimes. And then just kind of give one more picture of it. It's the man who shuts down during conflict, withdraws instead of engaging with the other person, and avoids difficult conversations, as I mentioned before, but equates vulnerability with being weak. But for me, I'm thinking like underneath avoidance is really not strength. Maybe cowardness. I mean, you name it. I don't know. I'm not labeling people or judging. I'm just giving some food for thought. It's often unmet need that learn to survive without connection. So that's important to know. It's probably an unmet need that learn to survive, right? Without connection. And while it may produce independence, which is amazing on one side, it can also produce other things like isolation, for sure, disconnection, and misunderstood leadership. Again, that's so important because that's if you're leading a team, you're leading a family, or whomever you're leading. And then the last, or another one of the attachment styles is disorganized attachment. Here we might talk about it as fearful attachment. A definition I want to bring up is a pattern of relating where a person both desires and fears connection, often due to inconsistent or unsafe relationships. So this is often the result of inconsistent, it's the result of chaotic or even unsafe caregiving environments. And so people, I believe we want connection, but we also fear it. I mean, of course, two things can be true, but I think we're just when we hold these two together, um, we see that this may show up then in leadership ways, like as unpredictable responses. It may show up as difficulty regulating stress. It may also show up as mistrust of authority. And then also emotional swings under pressure. Like these individuals, if you think about it more deeper, feel often drawn to and threatened by closeness, right? In men, this may be especially confusing internally for ourselves. So I think it's something to be mindful of. And that's because there is a desire to lead and connect, but also that's paired with a fear of being exposed. That's paired with the fear of being rejected or with the fear of losing control. So it's often a nervous system that never really learned like what consistent safety feels like. So I hope those that was helpful to like really walk through like those attachment styles. So when we talk about attachment, we're not just talking about behavior in the workplace. We're talking about how this may show up and manifest in other places. And so I hope that was helpful to just kind of see those four. Maybe let me know kind of which one resonate with you and what you may be navigating or questions about them. I would love to talk about them for sure. But yeah, so we talk about, when we talk about attachment, we're not just talking about, this in the workplace. Um, we're talking about how men show up everywhere that we lead, whether that's at home, whether that's at work, whether that's in relationships and in life. Because for me, like leadership isn't just a role. If we talk about it for this conversation, it's a pattern, right? And many men in our community, in the Hill to Lead community at least, we were shaped by environments that taught us to perform instead of feeling our feelings. It taught us how to just really push through instead of just pausing to be able to process and help metabolize your feelings and emotions. And the environment also taught us really that we have to stay silent instead of expressing. So over time, like I'm thinking that those patterns don't just stay personal, like they show up in where we lead, right? And so when a man like shuts down in conflict, when he overworks to prove himself, maybe when he's avoiding vulnerability or when he is struggling to trust others, like that's just not, in my opinion, personality. Like it's really just attachment style that's playing out in every area of our life, or if it's life or my life, right? And the truth is, like most of these patterns, and this is why I'm wanting to talk about this because I want to be able to help us be able to I be aware, but hopefully give grace and then really move through it in a way that's most productive and healthy. But yeah, most of these patterns were not chosen, right? They were learned. For some of us, they were modeled, but then of course over time and through society, they were reinforced. So, and I'm the hope dealer. So there's a hope here for this message as well, which is they're not permanent. They're not permanent. So what was learned can be unlearned, and that's for any place that we've learned something. It can be unlearned. I hear this all the time. That, oh yeah, I learned to do X, Y, Z. I learned to yell and fight and all those things, and to no, that could be unlearned. That could be unlearned. And so just so is this. And I think what is missing, so yeah, just like it was learned, can be unlearned. And I think what was missing in the learning and the modeling and reinforcement is, yeah, just the safety and the trust and the connection. Like, but for me, that can be built over time. So yeah, that's what it means to be, I think, a healed leader, a healed man, or a healed like person ascribing to like leading these places, just not being perfect, but really just being whole in those places, right, at home and work, but for sure within yourself. And that's where we're going to go next. I want to explore what happens when attachment patterns sort of collide, right? But not just in workplaces, but in every space that men can lead. So whether that is organizations and teams, whether that's families and fatherhood, whether that is in fraternities or brotherhood circles or churches or faith communities, all these environments are at their core. What I think about is relational ecosystems. So, and wherever there are relationships, there are attachment patterns at play. That might be a good place to cut and chop it out. But yeah, wherever there are relationships, there are attachment patterns at play. Like if leaders are aware of this, we can just understand this, reflect on this. They may unintentionally reinforce insecurity instead of safety, no matter the setting. So let's talk about them a little bit more again by breaking them down one by one. Anxious leaders may micromanage, they may over explain decisions, they may struggle with delegation, they may take disagreement personally. They often fear losing respect, they may often fear losing influence and for sure connection. So they really overwork, they overfunction, we see, and sometimes they really burn out um, to prove their worth. But I think it doesn't just show up at work. It shows up when a man when he feels responsible for everyone's emotional state at home, and when he struggles when his partner or kids are upset with him, and also when seeking validation in brotherhood or community spaces. Like the deeper issue, like isn't competence. Like, it's really just a fear of rejection or not being enough. Also, for avoidant leaders often struggle with emotional accessibility, like finding that that emotion. They believe that emotions slow things down, and then for sure, like vulnerability. Um, their thought here is that vulnerability weakens authority, and another thought is that connection isn't necessary for results. But I think people experience this as maybe, or I think anxious leaders experience, this as indifference or maybe distance or lack of support. And again, of course, anxious leadership, or excuse me, avoiding leadership doesn't just stop at the workplace. It shows up, when with men shutting down in conversations with his partner, maybe avoiding emotional presence with his children, or keeping like conversations very surface level, whether that's in like friendship or fraternity relationships, or even in church, right? It shows up when a man leads a church or leads in church or community without just more of that relational depth that we can really appreciate. Avoiding leadership can unintentionally create environments where people feel managed but not known. Um, so that's very key, or even present but not even connected. I wrote that down too. So to dive deeper into how this shows up for us men at home, like avoiding patterns, like I said, at home can unintentionally create environments where loved ones feel maybe just provided for. But I've seen this in recent sessions. They feel provided for, but not emotionally seen. And that's not just the man versus the woman or the woman versus the man. It could be both. But here, provided for but not emotionally seen, protected but not deeply known, and there's some depths to that. If you really stop and reflect, there's a way to be more deeper known than surface, right? Maybe present physically but not connected relationally. For many men, maybe black men, like this isn't just really about a lack of love. It's really often about how it was learned or how it was expressed. So, like we often interpret like love to look like working hard, staying strong, handling responsibility and like keeping, your emotions in check and contained. But again, just given that historical context, emotional restraint has often been tied to maybe one of three things. I mentioned this before, but just to say it again: survival, dignity, and then resilience. So, I think my thoughts here is, we it kind of looks like, or it's kind of the thoughts are, I'm here, I'm handling things, I'm doing my part. Like, what else do you need from me? And I think this is where the shift happened because leadership at home isn't just about providing. So if you're hearing this, we're trying to help rewire. It's not about provision; it's about presence, right? So not just being there, but being emotionally available, being engaged, being where your feet are, being known, and just hoping you hear this not as like being weak or demas, um, or making you yeah, just say making you feel weak. It's really about help, forming, moving in that more healing direction and redefining strength for yourself. So I hope just hearing some of those examples of avoidant and anxious leadership and how they show up at work or at home or in various places where men are leading were helpful. Like for me, maybe just an insight here is most conflict, whether that's at home, whether that's at church, or whether that's in brotherhood, it really isn't about the task. Again, as a reminder, it's about unmet relational safety needs. So when people feel psychologically safe, when they feel that, I believe like, that's when creativity increases. That's where accountability improves for us. That's where we're able to move our communication from like just surface communication to really being honest and being able to be vulnerable, and then connection deepens. So this is where I think leadership becomes more than like just strategy, but really kind of see the more stewarding the people that we are um, leading, if you will. And the last part of this episode I want to talk about is really how we get to earn attachment and leadership. So before I shift to into earn attachment leadership, I really want to acknowledge something. I use workplace examples because they're familiar and relatable to men, right? So, but I also recognize that, because I recognize that for many of us men, our identity is deeply tied to our work, really how we provide, how we achieve, and how we lead. And so I just think that for me can then be an entry point to the conversation. But I'm also remembering that real transformation for us happens not just at work, but also at home and in relationships and really in every space that we lead. So I hope it wasn't too much of a disconnect and like too far to the left to really bring in examples and conversations more aligned to workplace culture and leadership. But I think they can kind of be interchangeable, if you will. And so hopefully that was helpful. But yeah, one of the most powerful concepts I want to keep moving to in psychology is earned secure attachment. And it means that people can develop or can move into more secure, more develop security rather later in life through healthy relationships. So even if they didn't experience it early, I think it's still possible. And then, like I said, going back to workplace examples, workplaces can absolutely become environments where people begin to experience that shift for themselves, if not really through their family. So, what secure leadership looks like? Secure leaders create environments where people feel safe to speak honestly. Um, Environments where people feel safe to make mistakes and say, "Oops, I messed up." Even hopefully it's not too catastrophic. Or environments where people feel safe to even disagree respectfully. But most importantly, where people feel safe to grow. So it's not about perfection; it's really about consistency and doing the repair work. So when something goes wrong, I think about secure leaders being able to address it head on with clarity rather than sort of like feeling or experiencing shame. So, using like this team mindset as like some more of corrective experience, healthy teams can become corrective emotional experiences, meaning people can begin to learn a couple of things. One is disagreement doesn't have to equal rejection, or feedback does not have to equal humiliation, or mistakes do not have to equal abandonment. So, over time, like our nervous systems begin to relax. People start showing up with more confidence and more authenticity. And I think that's where the transformation begins to happen. So, some quick practical ways that we can foster secure attachment. One is consistency. Predictability builds nervous system safety. We know that, and people need to know really what to expect from leaders and from the men that are leading their families. Next one is emotional regulation. We as leaders, as men, we set the emotional tone for the room, and the more regulated you are, it helps the team to regulate because they're borrowing your regulated your nervous system. Clear communication. Ambiguity fuels anxious attachment. Brene Brown says clear is kind, and yet clarity reduces that fear. Four is repair conflict quickly. Security is built through repair, not through perfection. And then five, affirm worth beyond just performance. So people need to know that they matter as humans and not just as like productivity units. So I hope that was helpful. Again, talking about trying to blend two different topics, workplace culture with three different topics, workplace culture, masculinity norms, and attachment styles, all in one episode and one breath, if you will. So I hope that was helpful. Let me know what stuck out to you and what resonated with you in the comments, or for sure DM me on my social media spaces. But now we're at one of my favorite segments of every episode where we read a letter from a listener before we close out. And this is a letter that we're reading from someone who's listening, and they're writing into the show. They're dealing with life, mental health, and everything in between. And we hold space for them right here on the Heal to Lead podcast. And this listener letter from the listener comes from Trent. He says, "Hi, I'm in my early 30s, and lately I've been feeling really overwhelmed with social media. Every time I open Instagram or LinkedIn, it feels like everyone else is ahead of me. People are buying homes, they're starting businesses, they're getting promotions, they're traveling around the world, and I feel like I'm just trying to keep up. I know logically that social media is only shows highlights, but emotionally, it's hard not to compare. Sometimes it feels like I'm falling behind in life, and I find myself scrolling even when it makes me feel worse. Do you have any advice for how to stop comparing myself to everyone online? Thank you." Let me just start with this response. First, let me just say something that's very important to me, and I hope it is to you. But one, comparison, I'm probably one for normalizing first, right? Always like comparison is a very human experience. Like your brain, all of our brains are wired to like evaluate, where you stand in your social environment at its core. But social media like has created something that we really weren't ready for, in my opinion, or prepared us for. So we're now comparing our real life to thousands of people's highlight reels, depending on your algorithm and settings. So again, and that then for me can distort our perception of what reality is, and also what reality actually can be for ourselves. That's first. Second, I believe the thing that I want us to understand is comparison often activate attachment wounds. So it's using or coming from this particular topic today. When we see others succeeding, our nervous system may interpret that as I'm not enough. It may interpret it as, I'm behind, or it may interpret it as I'm failing. But I want you to know that your life is meant, or your life is not meant to follow someone else's timeline. I'll say it again. I want you to know that your life was not meant to follow someone else's timeline. Growth is not linear, and success really isn't universal, believe it or not. Like one of the healthiest practices that I think we can try is creating intentional boundaries with social media as a starting place. I mean, just to throw noodles to the wall. Maybe it's setting time limits on social media. Maybe it's unfollowing accounts that trigger comparison. That's a real thing too. It's not being rude. It's really taking care. It's being mindful actually and taking care of yourself. Yeah, so yeah, unfollow accounts if you feel that that's right for you. That triggers that comparison process for you. Also, another example could be maybe follow people who inspire growth rather than that insecurity. And maybe most importantly, too, like start measuring your life against maybe who you were yesterday, not someone else that you've seen online. I know that's easier said than done, but I think that's going to be probably the ground, the foundational support for yourself as you navigate that particular thing. I wrote in my notes for you as I was thinking about this. Real growth often happens quietly. So this is a tweet worthy or X worthy post here is real growth happens in the depth of you and not in the reels of social media. Real growth happens in the depths of you, not on the reels of social media. And the life that you're building may be far meaningful than the one that you are comparing yourself to. So give yourself grace. Know that you are enough. Know that you have a purpose and a calling for your life. You are unique and wonderfully made. And that's great and that's amazing. And I wish you well, and everyone else who's listening as well too. I wish you well too. And if you want to have a letter read on the Hill to Lead podcast, please email me at or email us at hilltolead@gmail.com, and we may read a letter from you. All right, so how are we closing this thing out? Oh yeah, that's what I wanted to do. Let's just before we close out today, just leave you with some reflection questions. They'll just be real quick. Some questions that I would take and reflect on is which attachment style do I see showing up the most in my leadership in my workplace relationships? Two is how do I typically respond when I feel rejected, when I feel criticized, or when I feel overlooked? And then three, what would it look like for me to lead or work from a place of secure connection rather than fear? That's a good one. And then this last one, just for as a bonus one, is how can I help create psychological safety for the people around me? That's big, men. That's your homework for this episode. Men, how can I help create psychological safety for the people around me? Let me know what you think. Put it in the comments as well. So closing out, attachment patterns may explain how we learn to relate to people, but they do not have to define how we live in the future. Healing creates the possibility for something so powerful, and that's what we talked about today, which is earned security. So when leaders do their own healing work, when men do their own healing work, they don't just change themselves. They have the power to change entire environments around them. So because people don't just follow leadership, they follow emotional safety. And the most powerful men and leaders are the ones who create it. So you heard it here first on the Hill to Lead podcast. We're signing out. Peace out.